The clock on the hospital wall ticked steadily into the silence of the night. The long hallway was bathed in a dull yellow glow, the kind that made everything feel half asleep. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Elena stepped into room 317, the last patient on her overnight rotation. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the floor, her hands tucked into the two long sleeves of her nurse-in-training uniform. Her eyes, though tired, still held a quiet gentleness that hadn't yet been worn down by the world. Inside the room, the only sound was the soft beeping of a heart monitor and the slow rhythm of a breathing machine. The man in the bed hadn't moved in 6 years. His name, printed on a faded file at the door, was Nathan Cole. According to the older nurses, he'd collapsed at a conference, had no next of kin, and had been in a coma ever since. His hospital bills were mysteriously paid every month by a private fund, but no one came to visit. He was a name, a chart, and a quiet responsibility. Elena walked closer, her steps slow, reverent. There was something different about this room, an energy she couldn't explain. She adjusted the checked the monitors, and gently lifted his hand to check his pulse manually, though the machines did that for her. His hand was rough, cold, the nails trimmed but dry. She looked at his face, the fine lines frozen in time, the faint gray stubble, the deep set of his eyes even in unconsciousness. Then she noticed the bandage on his arm. It hadn't been changed in days. Maybe longer. It wasn't dangerous, but it was neglected, forgotten, just like him. She walked over to the supply cart, pulled out fresh gauze and antiseptic, and returned to his side. With careful hands, she began to clean the old wound, a pressure sore that had faded to a scar. As she worked, she began to hum softly. Not a lullaby, not a song she remembered, just a melody that came to her. When the fresh bandage was on, she hesitated. Then, on impulse, she grabbed a pen from her pocket and, in a tiny corner of the bandage, drew a heart. Just a small one. A secret one. And next to it, she wrote his name in neat, looping letters, Nathan. There, she whispered, almost to herself. Now you're not just a chart. You're someone. She sat for a while after that. No one would notice, no one ever did. She told him about her day, how her feet ached from being on shift 12 hours straight, how her little sister was finally learning to tie her shoelaces. She told him how some days she wanted to quit, how the weight of everything felt too much, but how something about coming into this room made her feel calmer, lighter. As if he was listening. Nathan didn't move. Didn't speak. But the corner of his mouth twitched, just a little. Elena didn't notice. She was already getting up, collecting her chart, whispering, "Good night, Nathan." And as she stepped into the hallway, she didn't know that behind her, the heart monitor blinked just a little faster. Not an emergency. Just a beat, waking up. The morning light filtered gently through the blinds of room 317, casting long golden lines across the white bedsheets. The day nurse was halfway through her routine when she froze mid-step. Her eyes shot toward the heart monitor, then to the man lying still in the bed. She had walked into this room every morning for 3 years, and nothing had ever changed. But today, Nathan's eyes were open. Wide, hazel, and slightly unfocused, they blinked slowly at the unfamiliar world around him. His breathing had quickened. The once motionless hand twitched again, fingers curling slightly as if trying to remember how to move. The nurse dropped her clipboard and bolted out the door, shouting for Dr. Reyes, the head of the neurology department. Within minutes, the room was buzzing with medical staff, checking vitals, running scans, whispering in hushed, stunned voices. No one could believe it. 6 years in a coma, and then, he simply woke up. No warning. No sign. Just opened his eyes like waking from a deep, heavy sleep. Elena wasn't on duty that morning. She was fast asleep on the couch in her tiny apartment, her little sister curled up beside her like a cat. Her phone buzzed on the table. First once. Then again. Then a third time. It was a message from a fellow nurse. "You won't believe this. Nathan Cole is awake." Elena blinked, sat up, and read it again. Her heart started to race. Still groggy, she called the nurse station. "Is it true?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Come and see for yourself," came the reply. By the time she got to the hospital, Nathan had already been transferred to a special observation suite. The doctors were still running tests, still trying to explain the impossible. But all anyone could talk about was how calm he was. How he didn't panic or cry. How the only thing he asked repeatedly was, "Who changed my bandage?" The nurses looked at each other. One shrugged. It could have been anyone. But Nathan shook his head. There was a heart drawn on it, and my name. Elena stood at the edge of the glass observation window, her hands trembling. She didn't think he would notice. She hadn't drawn the heart for attention. It was just something she felt. Something she needed to do. But somehow, in the depths of unconsciousness, he had felt it. Moments later, a nurse stepped inside his room. "There's someone here who may have been the one," she said gently. Nathan turned his head slowly. And when Elena entered, everything in the room seemed to pause. His eyes locked on hers. And in a voice soft, gravelly, and unfamiliar from years of silence, he whispered, "It was you." Elena tried to speak, but nothing came out. The room felt smaller, quieter, sacred somehow. Nathan blinked slowly. "I heard your voice. I remember, the way you talked to me. I didn't want to wake up for years. I didn't care if I ever did. But then you started whispering things I didn't know I needed to hear." Elena stepped forward, tears pooling in her eyes. "I didn't think it would matter." "It mattered," Nathan said. "It brought me back." Behind her, the heart monitor beeped steadily. A living rhythm. The first of many that would soon begin to change both their lives forever. Nathan Cole's recovery was a miracle by every medical standard. The hospital buzzed with quiet disbelief, and yet every scan, every test came back clean. No neurological damage, no memory loss, no signs of trauma. He was a healthy man in his early 40s who had somehow slept through 6 years of life and then returned as if pulled back by a thread too thin to be seen. But the truth was, Nathan had forgotten something. Not in the medical sense. He remembered numbers, places, books he'd read, even the melody of songs. But when it came to his life, what had truly mattered, there was only a fog. No family visited him. No friends called. Not one soul walked through the hospital door asking for Nathan Cole. And yet, his bills had always been paid every month, on time, by a trust no one could trace directly. Elena noticed it too. While the nurses celebrated his progress and the doctors asked endless questions, she saw the quiet confusion behind his smile. The way he watched others hug visitors with a kind of quiet longing. How he never asked for his phone. Never checked emails. How he avoided the mirror. She came to see him after every shift, sometimes even when she wasn't working. She brought him stories about her little sister's obsession with chocolate cereal, about the strange patients who thought orange juice could cure everything, about the time the hospital cat snuck into the ICU and refused to leave. Nathan listened to her with full attention, as if each word were a breadcrumb back to the man he used to be. One evening, as she walked in with a thermos of her favorite mint tea, Nathan was staring out the window. The sunset turned the sky into fire. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "why we wake up?" Elena sat beside him. "All the time. I mean, it would have been easier to stay asleep. No fear, no guilt, no memory. But then I heard your voice. You were talking about your sister's drawing stuck on your fridge, and I swear, it made me want to come back." She looked at him, heart pounding. I just wanted you to feel seen. Everyone deserves that. He turned, eyes locked on hers. You didn't just make me feel seen. You made me remember who I wanted to be. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside the window slowed. Nathan reached into the drawer beside his bed and pulled out something folded, creased and stained from years of time, a piece of paper, stiff and faded. I found this in my jacket pocket after I woke up, he said. I don't remember putting it there. Elena leaned closer. It was a sketch. A house. A dog. A garden. A woman standing at the door with open arms. A little boy on a swing. On the back, in scratchy handwriting, were the words, "Don't forget what home feels like." I think this was who I used to be, Nathan whispered. Elena's voice cracked. Then let's help you find him again. And for the first time since he opened his eyes, Nathan smiled, not because he had survived, but because he was ready to live again. The weeks passed gently, like pages turning in a book neither of them wanted to end. Nathan's strength returned with surprising speed, though his doctors advised patience. He still spent most of his time in the recovery ward, undergoing physical therapy and cognitive evaluations, but in truth, the real healing wasn't happening on the medical charts. It was happening in the quiet, unrecorded hours spent talking to Elena. They had developed a rhythm. She would arrive after her shift, sometimes with snacks, sometimes with just a tired smile. He'd sit up straighter when she entered, like her presence realigned something inside him. They didn't talk about the coma anymore. They talked about now. One rainy evening, Elena walked in soaked from the storm, her shoes squeaking across the floor. Nathan laughed as she pulled off her wet hoodie, her hair sticking to her cheeks. You look like someone drowned a kitten, he teased. Oh hush, she huffed, tossing him a wrapped sandwich. Be grateful. I crossed 2 flooded streets and 1 broken umbrella to bring you that. He smiled, unwrapping the sandwich with care. You're the only visitor I've ever had. You could bring me a brick and I'd still be thankful. That comment lingered. Elena sat at the edge of the bed, brushing damp hair behind her ear. Can I ask you something? Something real? Nathan nodded. Always. Where is everyone? She asked softly. Your family. Friends. The people who loved you, where did they go? Nathan's gaze dropped. The sandwich in his hand forgotten. He exhaled slowly, like releasing a breath held far too long. I don't know, he admitted. I remember a boardroom. I remember deals, hotels, flights, numbers, always numbers. I think I was rich. Powerful maybe. But the more I remember the money, the less I remember people. Elena's throat tightened. Maybe they just didn't know you woke up. Nathan turned to the window. Rain raced down the glass like tiny rivers. No. I think they knew. I think I just didn't matter to them anymore. Silence wrapped the room, warm and heavy. Then he said something that made Elena freeze. There's a safe deposit box, or there was. I remember signing something years ago. A trust fund. A backup plan. I think I left something in it, in case I never woke up. What kind of something? She asked. He looked at her then, eyes steady. Everything. Her brows furrowed. Everything, like your assets? He nodded. If I died in that coma, the money would be donated anonymously to a children's hospital. But if I woke up, he trailed off. Elena leaned forward. Then what? He gave her a soft, unreadable smile. Then I'd find someone who reminded me why I came back. Someone who gave me hope when I had none. Elena's breath caught. Nathan, he raised a hand. I'm not saying anything crazy. I just... I think maybe you were never just changing a bandage. Maybe you were waking up a soul. She looked down at her hands, flustered. You give me too much credit. No, he said. I don't think I give you enough. Outside, the storm roared on, but inside the hospital room, something quiet and profound began to bloom, something fragile, unspoken, and utterly real. A week after their conversation, something unexpected arrived at the hospital, an envelope, thick and official-looking, bearing the name Nathan Cole in gold embossed letters. It had been forwarded from a legal office that had been managing his affairs during his coma, and it contained information about a trust Nathan himself had established years ago, before the accident that put him to sleep. He stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside were two things: a formal letter from the law firm and a copy of his original instructions regarding his estate. Elena sat beside him, silent, sensing this wasn't just about money or legalities, it was a confrontation with a version of himself Nathan had almost forgotten. He opened the letter first. Dear Mr. Cole, as per your directive in 2018, your assets have remained under protective custody during your period of incapacitation. The clause stated that upon recovery, full control of the trust would be reinstated to you. Additionally, you indicated that if, upon waking, you believed you were inspired by the act of a stranger, a note you personally handwrote, we were to transfer the entirety of the discretionary fund to the individual named by you, no questions asked. Elena blinked. Wait, what? Nathan slowly unfolded the handwritten page clipped behind the legal documents. There, in faded blue ink, was his own script: if I ever wake up, and if someone reminds me what it means to feel alive, if someone offers me kindness with no expectation, I want them to have a new beginning. Give them the life I couldn't live without forgetting what mattered. Nathan looked up, his throat tight. I don't remember writing this. But I know I meant it. Elena shook her head slowly, in disbelief. Nathan, you don't need to. I do, he interrupted. Because for years, I thought I had everything. But I didn't know what it meant to be truly seen, not by shareholders, not by business partners, not by people who praised me for deals I closed. You, Elena, you changed a bandage, but you also talked to me like I was still here. You told me about your sister. You sang to me. You whispered into the dark when no one else believed I could hear. His voice cracked. You were the only person who treated me like a human being, not a case. You didn't know who I was, and you still showed up. Elena sat in stunned silence, 100 emotions crashing into her all at once. Gratitude. Guilt. Fear. Hope. He slid the papers across the bed toward her. I want you to take this. It's more than money, it's a chance. You said once that you felt stuck. That you'd never afford proper training, a better life for your sister, your dream of starting a care center for children who grew up like you did. She stared at the folder. I didn't say that so you'd do this. I know, he said. That's why you deserve it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena reached for the folder, her fingers brushing his. Her voice trembled as she whispered, You woke up a millionaire, Nathan. But I think you were already rich the moment you decided to come back. Nathan smiled, a tear escaping down his cheek. Then maybe we both just got lucky. The world outside the hospital hadn't changed much, but for Elena and Nathan, everything felt different. Within 2 weeks of signing the papers, Nathan's transfer to a private rehabilitation center was arranged, and his recovery accelerated. The once quiet man now moved with purpose. His physical strength returned, and so did the light in his eyes. Meanwhile, Elena was flooded with new responsibilities, though she still clocked into the hospital for her usual shifts. She hadn't touched the money. Not yet. It felt too surreal, like a dream she'd wake up from any moment. But Nathan insisted, this wasn't a reward. It was a partnership. A beginning, not an end. And so, together, they made a plan. Their first visit was to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, a street filled with weather-worn homes, some newly painted, others cracked with time. Nathan had found a house. Not too big. Not too small. But exactly what Elena had once described on a late night in room 317. A porch with chipped stairs. A kitchen big enough to dance in. A small garden where her sister could grow sunflowers. When she stepped inside, her breath caught in her throat. It was empty. But it felt like home. Elena turned to him, trying to speak, but Nathan simply handed her a key. "It's yours. I already signed the deed." She covered her mouth, overcome. "Nathan, it's not charity," he said. "It's roots." Tears welled in her eyes. She thought of her little sister, how they had shared a cramped apartment with thin walls and colder winters. She thought of the nights she ate less so her sister could have more, of the time she pawned her favorite necklace just to pay for school shoes. And now, this. She hugged him tightly, her voice muffled against his chest. "Thank you." That night, Elena moved in. There was no furniture yet, just a mattress on the floor, a box of blankets, and 2 bowls of instant noodles. Her little sister danced across the wooden floors, squealing, "Is this really our house?" Elena laughed through her tears. "It is." Meanwhile, Nathan returned to his private apartment for now, though it felt empty without their nightly talks. He sat by the window, the city lights flickering outside, and stared at a photo he had taken that afternoon, Elena and her sister, standing in front of the new house, arms raised, sun setting behind them. Something about the image stirred something deep in him. He wasn't just alive. He was needed. He was part of something again. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "Set up the foundation," he said. "Elena's Care Center. I want it up and running in 6 months." "And the chairperson?" the lawyer asked. Nathan smiled. "Elena Rodriguez. And don't even think about arguing with me." The man who once measured success by spreadsheets and profit margins now measured it by moments, a healed hand, a shared meal, a little girl spinning in circles on a creaky wooden floor. And deep inside, Nathan knew. Waking up from the coma wasn't the real miracle. Meeting Elena was. 6 months later, a quiet revolution took place in a forgotten corner of the city. Where an abandoned community clinic once stood, its walls cracked, its doors locked, and hope long since drained, a transformation had bloomed. A fresh coat of paint now covered the exterior, soft pastel hues welcoming anyone who passed by. The new sign above the entrance read, "The Elena Center for Healing and Care." It wasn't flashy. It didn't make headlines. But inside, it pulsed with purpose. Children lined up after school for free checkups. Elderly patients came for physical therapy and warm conversation. Mothers sought prenatal care without fear of judgment or bills. Every visitor was greeted with dignity, whether they arrived in wheelchairs or worn-out shoes. And at the center of it all was Elena, no longer a nurse in training, but the soul of a mission. She wore her scrubs with pride, though now they had her name stitched into the chest. Her younger sister volunteered in the reading corner after school, stacking children's books and drawing posters that read "Be kind. You never know who needs it." Nathan visited often. Sometimes to sit quietly in the back room and listen to laughter echo down the hallways. Other times to join Elena during outreach events or plan expansion projects. But mostly, he just liked being close to the energy that had pulled him back to life. One afternoon, Elena found him in the break room, standing by the wall where photos of the center's volunteers and staff were hung. He was staring at a drawing tacked beside them, one her sister had made. A stick figure with a beard, standing beside a woman with long brown hair. Above it, written in crayon, "My aide Elena and Mr. Nathan saved our world." Nathan chuckled softly, eyes warm. "I'm taller in this picture." Elena smiled, leaning beside him. She made you a superhero. He glanced at her. I'm just a man who was given a second chance. She looked back at the wall. No, you took that chance. Most people would have walked away. He turned to her. And you didn't walk away from a stranger in a coma. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air thickened with something tender and unspoken. Time had stretched and molded their connection into something neither of them had planned, quiet, steady, undeniable. Nathan cleared his throat. I was thinking, Elena tilted her head. That always makes me nervous. He laughed. I was thinking about starting a mentorship program here. For young people who feel invisible. Who think no one sees them. Her expression softened. You'd be perfect for that. You'd help me? With everything, she whispered. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things words couldn't hold: gratitude, trust, something that felt dangerously close to love. Later that week, Nathan was invited to speak at a small gathering organized by the city's health board. He wasn't used to microphones or cameras. But when he stepped on stage and told the story of a girl who changed a bandage and unknowingly rewrote a life, the room fell completely silent. And when I woke up, he said slowly, his voice thick, I thought I'd return to a life of spreadsheets and silence. Instead, I found purpose. I found people who mattered. And I found her. The audience stood and applauded. Some cried. And among them, at the back of the room, Elena stood with her hands clasped, her heart full. Because Nathan hadn't just woken up wealthy. He had woken up whole. The air buzzed with quiet joy as volunteers at the Elena's Center strung up soft white lights across the community garden. It was the center's one-year anniversary, a celebration not of milestones, but of moments. Elena stood at the far end of the yard, setting down trays of food, her ponytail swaying behind her. She wore a light blue dress instead of her usual scrubs, and for the first time in weeks, she looked rested. Whole. Nathan watched her from a distance, his hands in his pockets, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. The night felt different. He walked toward her slowly, passing through a sea of people who nodded, smiled, whispered kind words. You saved my son. Your center helped me walk again. Thank you for seeing us. But none of those words meant as much as the ones he was about to say. Elena turned just as he reached her. You're late, she teased, raising an eyebrow. Fashionably, he grinned, then paused. Can we talk for a second? She nodded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. He led her toward the small bench beneath the large oak tree, the same one where they'd once talked about dreams and doubts when the building was still just an idea. Nathan sat beside her, then took a deep breath. You know, he began, when I first woke up, I thought the miracle was just that I was alive. But over time, I realized, the real miracle wasn't waking up. It was you being there when I did. Elena's smile faded into something gentler. Her eyes shimmered beneath the garden lights. I've spent months trying to find the right way to say thank you, he continued. But nothing ever felt big enough. Not the house. Not the center. Not even the foundation we built together. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small box, worn at the edges. Elena's breath caught. She didn't dare move. I used to carry this everywhere, he said. Even when I was nobody. Even when I lived out of a hospital bed and couldn't speak. I kept it in my jacket pocket because it reminded me there was still hope for something more. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. Modest. Elegant. A soft sparkle caught the light, but the true shine came from the way he looked at her. Elena, he whispered, voice trembling, I didn't just find healing with you. I found my home. And I don't want to spend another day pretending you're just part of my recovery. You're part of my life. He knelt. Gasps echoed behind them as a few nearby guests noticed. A hush fell over the garden. Will you marry me? He asked. Not because you changed my bandage, but because you changed everything. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Her knees trembled. And in that moment, all the late nights, the whispered conversations, the tiny acts of kindness, they came flooding back. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. Yes, she finally managed. 1,000,000 times, yes. The crowd erupted in cheers. Children threw flower petals. Her sister jumped up and down, squealing with joy. And in the middle of it all, Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. It wasn't the ring of a millionaire. It was the ring of a man reborn. A man who had nothing and found everything in the heart of a stranger. The wedding was not grand. There were no crystal chandeliers, no designer gowns, no private islands. Instead, it took place right where their journey had truly begun, beneath the old oak tree in the garden of the Elena Center. The same place where patience had once found healing now bore witness to a celebration built not on extravagance, but on grace. Children ran barefoot on the grass, volunteers cried softly in the back rows, and Elena's younger sister walked her down the aisle, holding her hand like a treasure. Nathan stood waiting in a dark suit, not expensive, but carefully pressed. His eyes never left Elena's face. When she reached him, there were no nerves. Just peace. The ceremony was short, but every word mattered. When the officiant asked Nathan if he promised to love, protect, and walk beside her for the rest of his days, he answered with a voice so steady it could carry mountains. I already have. And when Elena said I do, her voice cracked, but no one cared, because love doesn't always arrive in perfect sentences. The kiss that followed wasn't just a promise, it was a quiet thank you. For life. For healing. For being seen when the world had looked away. Their first dance was under fairy lights strung by former patients and volunteers. A little girl who once couldn't walk now twirled in circles with her friends nearby. A young boy who used to hide behind his mother's legs now ran up and handed Elena a drawing of the couple, stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. Nathan framed the drawing in his new office, his real office, on the second floor of the Elena Center. It wasn't lined with expensive books or decorated with awards. It had mismatched chairs, a hand-knitted blanket, and a jar of candy he never replenished because patience kept doing it for him. People came to him not for diagnoses or medicine, but for something far rarer, understanding. Sometimes, he'd close the door and just listen. Other times, he'd quietly place a hand on someone's shoulder and say, I know how it feels. But I promise, it gets better. Because it did. Nathan and Elena's story became something of a quiet legend. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. It reminded people that kindness doesn't require riches or perfection. Sometimes, it just takes one moment, one gentle gesture, to change a life. Years later, when reporters asked Elena what made her change that old bandage in room 317, she smiled and said, I just thought he deserved to be treated like a person. That's all. But that all had built a forever. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope can rise from the quietest corners and love can be found in the most unexpected places, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more real, emotional journeys that remind us of what truly matters in life. Tell us in the comments, has a small act of kindness ever changed your life? We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, stay kind, keep believing, and never underestimate the power of one gentle act.